Okay, I want to preface this with I really, really like where this guy. Oh, I fucked that up. I really like where this guy was going with things. I'll have to run through the rest of it, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a second. Let me post this. I'll read this to you. I pinched his video in case he blocks me because people love to cater to fascism. I mean censorship, same thing. And what he mentions in here is wisdom. Most of you probably don't know what I'm talking about because you've never thought about it, which also speaks to what he's talking about. Kind of. So, wisdom is unattainable in our flesh prisons. I'm talking about our bodies. Yeah? Why would that be? Because you can run around and you in this life you'll dash around and you'll accrue or you'll gain knowledge, bits and pieces, but you're never gonna know everything. And if you did, your mind would probably turn to mush. Uh, no, really, it's not possible. So anytime you've heard somebody waxing poetic about wisdom or being wise, it's laughable. It is fucking laughable. People don't know the difference between a number of things. Eternity and infinity is another great example. And you hear all these pseudo intellectuals waxing poetic, it's priceless. Back to point. So I said I was excited to hear you out up until you rattled off something or rattled something off that makes absolutely no sense and just so happens to be ironic based on what you're presenting on the DARPA internet. As you can tell, my mind gets ahead of my mouth and vice versa often. And I knock out variations to things often, and sometimes it slips out. Case in point, a moment ago. I said, perhaps you shouldn't have reacted, which is something he's urging people to do. You should have thought about what you hoped to impart. Now, what I'll do is I'll splice this into the video that I pinched, and we'll see if he blocks me, which is why I bookmarked this. This is the first video I've seen on TikTok. And keep in mind, this is as far as I got into it if you look at the timestamp. There's a lot more to this, and I'm curious what he has to say, but he fucked up at this point. He already fucked up. And that's why 23,000 people have seen this. In other words, I was excited to hear what he had to say, but he had a lot of people who have seen his message, which means he's shopping around something that's absolute fucking garbage. Propaganda, distraction campaigns, and or just flat out misleading bullshit. Most of you probably don't think, or won't think, based on how many people have reacted to me throughout the years, what I said is important. Who cares, man? Knowledge and wisdom. Right? You're going to probably dismiss it. Most of you probably would. It's important to appreciate how reality fucking works. People are being sold a gray area these days of wishy-washy bullshit, and they call it truth. Couldn't be further from the fucking truth. Which is also ironic. Either way, I'll splice this into that jazz and you can hear the entire message. And if he doesn't block me after I go through the rest of this, I'll probably point out numerous things that he'll probably fuck up. I imagine, maybe I'm wrong, but most likely he fucked up a bunch of shit in here, which is why people have seen this.
You ever notice how everybody's intelligent until real intellect walks in the room? Or how everybody's a critical thinker until it's time to actually think critically? Then you see who's been studying the truth and who's just rehearsing opinions. You see, we live in a time now where intelligence is a trend. People don't study, they just scroll. They don't reflect, they simply react. They can memorize talking points from podcasts, memes, and then call it research. But the minute you ask for a source, logic, or context, they fall apart every single time. And that's because real intellect requires real world experience. How can you understand truth without pressure? How can you know wisdom if you've never been tested? And that's because experience, it humbles you. It teaches you that life don't move by theory, it moves by principle. You see, a man who's been broke, betrayed, or blindsided, but still got up and rebuilt afterwards, he thinks differently. He doesn't get high off of opinions. He's grounded in reality because he's actually lived the consequences of his own choices. You see, the problem today is that people like to confuse access to information with intellect. I mean, just because you can Google something doesn't mean you understand it. knowledge without experience is like having muscle with no motion. I mean, you might look strong, but you can't lift the damn thing. And then the receipts are everywhere if you want to talk facts. Most people are not critical thinkers, they're confirmation seekers. A 2021 study shows that nearly 70% of social media users share headlines that they never read. Let that sink in. They don't even analyze the information, they just chase validation. And that's why misinformation spreads faster than facts do, because it feels good to the ego. Even the education system doesn't teach thinking, it teaches compliance. In 1903, when John Rockefeller funded the General Education Board, you can look this up, his goal wasn't to create thinkers, it was to create workers. And in his exact words, he said, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers." So, most people were trained to repeat what they're told and never to question it. Even history proves that real intellect is always attacked first. Just look at Malcolm X, a man with no college degree who could outthink professors, journalists, and politicians. They called him dangerous because he questioned their narratives. Or, we can go back even further. You can look at Socrates. He was executed for corrupting the youth simply by teaching them to think. Real intellect has always been treated as a rebellion of some sort. That's because experience sharpens intellect like struggle sharpens your character. The man who's been homeless, betrayed, oppressed, but studied and reflected through it, he gains a type of discernment that no textbook can give. He learns how people really move, how systems really work, and how emotions can be used to manipulate you. That's what you call wisdom through warfare. And because of that, look at the culture now. We got people quoting psychology terms like gaslighting, trauma, and narcissist, but never read a fucking psychology book in their life. They just use buzzwords to sound intellectual. That's not critical thinking, that's just emotional vocabulary dressed up as intelligence. I know the difference. Or you can even look at politics. How everybody's woke until the truth offends their favorite party. Then suddenly, logic don't even matter no more. They say, do your research. But what they really mean is, find something that agrees with me. Tell me I'm lying. That's not critical thinking, that's tribal comfort. Hell, you can even look at religion. People can quote scripture, but not the context. They cherry pick scripture to defend their lifestyle instead of transforming themselves through it. That's why when a man who's actually studied, lived it, and applies it daily, soon as he walks in the room, that's when everybody get quiet. Because divine intellect, it cuts right through the hypocrisy without raising its voice. You see, real intellect isn't emotional, it's about strategy. It doesn't debate for attention, it dissects for clarity, like I do on my platform. It's calm under pressure because it's been tested in fire already. And that's why the loudest ones usually know the least. They're trying to hide insecurity by being loud. A man with true intellect doesn't need to dominate a conversation. His presence does that just by being there. He's seen too much, he's learned too much, and he's survived too much to waste his time arguing with the blind. You can tell who's never experienced real struggle also, by the way, because they love to romanticize it. They like to speak on masculinity without having to lead. They talk about discipline without ever being tempted once in their life. And then they can quote God, but never had to depend on him. Experience gives intellect its edge. That's why some of the wisest people you'll ever meet never set foot in a university. That's simply because life was their classroom and pain was their professor. You see, in Divine Separation, my platform, intellect isn't about showing off. It's about seeing clearly. It's about separating lies from insight, pride from purpose, and people who are followers from people that are actually thinkers. It's about understanding that most people don't hate intellect. They simply just hate intellect hate what intellect reveals about them. You see, real intellect forces accountability. It makes people confront their ignorance, their inconsistencies, and their emotional reactions. And that's why real thinkers get labeled as arrogant, cold, or elitist. Because the truth, it doesn't stroke their ego, it simply exposes them. So when you walk in with real intellect, backed by study, struggle, and discernment, you don't just speak different, you move different also. You can see the deception before it even speaks. You can sense the manipulation before it unfolds. And then on top of that, you stop mistaking being loud for knowledge, because it isn't. That's divine intellect. Intellect that comes from God, logic, and application. Not your pride, not your college degrees, not online approval. Because everybody's intelligent until real intellect enters the room. Everybody's a critical thinker until they're faced with actual critical thinking. Let that sink in.
Okay, so he mentions Malcolm X. And between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, I would definitely pick Malcolm X. Because at least what he promoted, what he urged people to think in terms of, was action to change things. And I'm not talking, peaceful horse shit, because that's not what reflects history. It's not how things change. But what I also want you to appreciate is Malcolm X was a racist. He was most likely controlled opposition to some degree. Otherwise, you would not know his name. Same applies to not the racism part, as far as I'm aware, but Martin Luther King. But Malcolm X was vocal about his racist beliefs. And it's unfortunate. Because as somebody, I like how he presented himself, but I don't know if he was a phony or not. But the fact that you know his name, it's a red flag. It likely means that he had been, what am I thinking? I'm thinking infiltrated, corrupted, compromised in some form or way. And yeah, you can say, oh, but this happened to him and this happened to Martin Luther King. Our masters sacrificed their puppets because a martyr will be remembered. Think about what I said. You could look into it. You could think about it. Pretend, I'm full of shit. Just the same. I feel like these disclaimer statements are important, especially when you bring up a celebrity puppet. Pardon me, I'm eating a salad. I was about to praise this fella, and I technically do feel this way. He is well-spoken, and I like the delivery of his message. But around this timestamp, he once again reaffirms wisdom, which is laughable in its misdirection. In other words, it does not benefit you and I thinking in terms of that, in terms of those parameters. It's knowledge, and it's important to understand how these two differ from one another. Because if you don't, you might mislead others by example, which is exactly what he's done in this video twice. So by this point in the message, I'm going to be sad if this guy blocks me. But I am going to knock his dick in the dirt because he's wrong about wisdom. Now, I know I've kicked the shit out of that dead horse, and most of you probably don't care. He is mentioning a number of things which I've complained about at length. And I like that people probably heard him say these things, unlike me, because I'm censored on the DARPA internet. I like that he brought these things up. Case in point, he's talking about psychological, jargon. Social engineering jargon is really what it is. It bleeds into anything that's well-financed by the Rockefeller Trust you shouldn't trust. Psychology is one of them. Big Pharma is one of them. And damn near everything else you're probably familiar with. I shit you not. But he's mentioning gaslighting and what have you at this point in the video. And he's right. He's right. What do I say often? I say people are marching in lockstep. They're not thinking for themselves. It's essentially what he's also saying, because it's absolutely undeniably true. He's talking about people reposting things without verifying them. This is why you and I were given access to the DARPA internet, something I've complained about at length. I've also given you guys a bone, a tool you could follow up on. It would take time and energy, And I don't know anybody who's been watching the videos I leave online every single day and have for over 10 years who have gone back and pinpointed the date when the Davos panel spoon-fed you and I a public transcript stating that you and I would be given access to the internet, cell phones, and what became social engineering platforms known as social media. Why? Quite literally to do what this guy's complaining about. In other words, if you dance it back and you appreciate where it came from, you dig up the fucking roots that reflect reality, you could understand how we've been manipulated. And you could tell others to look into this. Don't buy into what I said, but look into where it fucking came from. Because if you do, it colors all of this as a red flag. I'm talking about everything having to do with the technological age, for lack of better words. Same applies to people being herded into the cities, being sold a false promise of, here, leave the farm, do this, do that, and suddenly the farms are being bought up. The farms are being hijacked. The food supply is hijacked. The food supply is weaponized. Once again, if you dance it fucking back, what do you see? Everything has been fucking corrupted, infiltrated, and what did I say earlier? Compromised. But people do not look back at things. They don't dig up the roots. They don't put in the time. They're not invested. They're not involved. Something else I often rattle off. Needless to say, when I do hear somebody that comes kind of close to the mark, based on the things that I've said one too many fucking times, because I've used a lot of my energy, my breath, trying to help people. And I've had a lot of people whine at me. But when I hear somebody else doing it, and they have traction on the DARPA internet, it is a point of frustration to me. Because I know, in my heart of hearts, that they're shopping around propaganda to some degree. And that's the only reason why they have fucking traction, because the algorithm caters to that shit. It speaks volumes, too, because you could reason out as much based on the fact that I am censored. Right now, my YouTube videos that are longer than a minute, nobody is watching them, for the most part. 0 views. Some of them I've posted numerous times. 0 views. That's how far gone things are, but all these narcissistic, superficial internet babies are getting a pat on the ass, having to do with the social engineering feedback loop. Gold star, gold star, gold star. So they don't care. So they support censorship, which is a shade of fascism. Shadow banning, canceling, polarizing positive vibes only. These are all examples. Fake news, Snopes, debunked. Those are also examples of fascism, censorship. And I'm curious if he's going to mention any of that in this video. I'm recording this now at this timestamp because I hope I'm wrong. He just mentioned politics and voting, essentially. Your favorite party is what he said. That promotes the Hegelian dialectic, which is also a shade of fascism. Blue versus red, conquer and divide. Does this mean anything to you? Because it's bread and circuses, motherfucker. In other words, if he does not go on to tell you that it promotes the Hegelian dialectic, or it's dividing people, or another variation of what I just fucking said, he is misleading people by example and promoting a fucking propaganda campaign. Normalizing the idea of choosing a side and quite literally driving a stake between people. I'm very curious if he will, but I doubt that he will. Highly doubt it. Okay, so we're at this point in the timestamp or the video. What I want you to think about is what I had to say about knowledge and wisdom. You can acquire knowledge. You're never gonna embody wisdom. You can't do it. Okay? So in terms of leaving a video online, it's something I've tried to do every single time I click record, which is why I'll boast about it, but really it's me complaining about it because I shouldn't have to fucking do it. But things are very far gone, so they are far gone, so I have to do it. At least I feel the need to do it so that you guys think for yourselves, hopefully. I'm a walking disclaimer statement. Most people aren't thinking at all, which is why they will click record and they'll say superficial, slop. But the last thing they would do if they did figure out some of this stuff is repeat the disclaimer statements multiple times because most people don't understand what it's like to be censored. In other words, I repeat this shit because 1 or 2 people see the fucking video. Then I record another variation to it, and I repeat the same disclaimer statements, hoping that another 2 people will fucking see the video. The reason I clicked record on this is I like where this guy is coming from. He doesn't understand that he has traction because he's wrong about a number of things, and he's not willing to dig deeper. In other words, it's superficial still, which is ironic. But when you do click record and you leave a message, his video is only 11 minutes long. It's hard to touch on all these disclaimer statement points and build shit up for other people, especially in a short amount of time. Let alone when you're trying to convey something else to the masses, to the brain-dead masses. I'm speaking from experience. Sometimes I can spit some of this stuff out in maybe a 10-minute block, sometimes, depending on what's what. But some of the really neat stuff falls to the wayside. Not that anybody would think about it anyhow. And if they're not considering the disclaimer statements, which have to do with how we've been manipulated and what most people are fucking catering to, what they're quite literally promoting in terms of the propaganda, it's all for naught. It's all for naught. So what I'm saying is it's very hard to touch on all the disclaimer statements, let alone bring them up if you're trying to teach somebody something. You get that fire in your heart and you want to relate something to somebody else. And then you have to dance it back and you have to remember to caution them every couple of steps because they don't know anything and they don't mean to. They're there to click repost. They're there to bob their heads and try to shop around what you're saying as their own to pretend that they're smarter than they truly are. That's how most people conduct themselves. It's essentially what he's saying in a number of times in this video. You just got to think about the limitations of life. In terms of books, you and I will never read every single book on this rock in a lifetime. It's impossible. It's a shitty analogy, but the same applies to clicking record, knocking out a 10 or 11 minute video, and trying to touch on all of these things that people do need to know, do need to think in terms of, and aren't willing to fucking do so on their own. Now that's another horse I had to kick because people are fucking stupid. I just don't like that I caught him in that blink. I think I just lost it. I'm finally eating, so I finally got a little tired. What I was going to mention earlier, and I don't know if I spit it out. This is one of the first people I've seen on TikTok. I think ever. I think this is the first fella I've ever seen on TikTok where I wanted to repost his video when I heard him begin with his, with this, with his presentation is what I'm trying to spit out. But I knew better. I knew if I watched the video, he was going to stumble in a couple of ways. We're human. I do it all the time. Just to be clear. I'm not better than you. I don't know more than you. You know what I mean? In terms of, well, that's a slippery slope. Most people out there probably can do things and know things that I will never know or appreciate. And if we were in a tight spot, I would probably fuck up out of the gates. The same applies to what most people are doing in terms of fucking you and I up in terms of society, if that makes sense. It was a poor delivery on my part, but yeah. I don't think of myself as better than you guys. I really don't. All those other things that I'm sure a lot of people probably assume because I've been challenging folks and hoping that you'll pull your head out of your ass. You'll quit acting like a fucking retard. You'll actually do the right thing, not just say that you are and pretend that you are and assume that you are. You will take pause and work with things and reason things out. We live in superficial times. They're phony as fuck. Phony as fuck. And worse than ever before, obviously, but not obvious to most superficial phony fuckers. Same difference. I really doubled down on that. This one kicked me in the pants. I was excited that I saw a video that spoke to me and actually sounded like it might make sense. And I hoped that I wouldn't have to feel the need to click record and do what I'm doing right now. Now is a great time to think about most of the slop that you see on a daily basis and what I really think of that. Fucking rot. A couple final points. Let this sink in. I have an account ban warning on TikTok. TikTok has destroyed 3 or 4 of my accounts. And I've explained that before. It's fucking weird and shitty and not how things should be if TikTok is shopping around truth. Yeah. So I'm going to click play and this. He's still afforded a watermark. They took this away from me before they shut down TikTok for a 24-hour period. I have not had access to this in a very long time. That should speak volumes. I've got 10 people in my fucking account. Why was this taken away from me? Think about it. And it's because I can teach you things you're not supposed to know. What I'm talking about does go somewhere because I've taken the time and energy to reason it out so that I'm not misleading you. So that you could do the right thing. With a clean message, in other words. If you were to click repost and share things that I leave on the DARPA internet, you wouldn't be misleading people. Because I didn't trip you up. I didn't fuck you up. And you won't fuck others up. I can't think of a single fucking person that I've encountered in 10 years who I can say the same about. Not one. Not one. And shit like that keeps me up. But it probably doesn't bother you. And that's if you saw this and if you sat through the message. But most importantly, if you use the gray matter between your fucking ears to think about it. So I'm going to see if the comment I left on here is still here. It's not at the top of the stack. How long ago was this? Let's see. 2 days ago? 1 day ago? In other words, my comment disappeared. Because I'm censored. A while back, TikTok was knocking some of my comments down to the middle of the stack and potentially the bottom, and I could be wrong, with these giant... Okay, so this video has a lot of followers, a lot of viewers. Shuffling through here would take fucking forever. And I mean, I could do it. I'm that kind of bastard, but I'm not going to do it today. The point being, what I told him is gone, most likely, in one way or another. The other point I want to mention is if he had seen it before this was taking place, before I realized that it was taking place, mind you, accounts like this, when I challenge them, they usually block me. Some will whine at me and then block me, but none of them do this. None of them click on my account, usually. I've had maybe, I'm already having a fucking laugh. He listed his pronouns. This guy's a fucking idiot. This guy's a fucking idiot. That bothers me because I wanted to like this guy. I thought about following the account, to be honest, when I first heard him speak. But he's a fucking moron. He does not know what he's talking about, and that's why 33,000 people are following him. And like, as I was saying, most people don't click on my fucking account. And if you do follow my account, chances are you probably won't see some of the cool stuff pop up in your feed, especially now because TikTok will remove the videos, mute the videos, and do something else fucking weird with the videos. What the fuck do I know? I can teach you things unlike all these other bastards, and this guy, it really gets under my skin. I wanted to like this one.